Frequency Podcast Network. Stories that matter, podcasts that resonate.
Friday afternoon, as many Canadians were driving home from work and getting ready for the weekend, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau hopped on his government jet following an event in Prince Edward Island, and he headed back to Ottawa. That's not unusual, but what came next was unexpected. Instead of staying in the capital, the Prime Minister picked up his Public Safety Minister, Dominic LeBlanc, and his government jet began flying south. Reporters soon took notice and tracked the plane until it touched down in West Palm Beach, Florida, where Trudeau and LeBlanc, along with the Prime Minister's closest advisor, Katie Telford, made their way to Mar-a-Lago, the luxury resort owned by incoming U.S. President Donald Trump. Trudeau became the first G7 leader to meet face-to-face with Trump since his election last month. The 3-hour dinner meeting went well, according to Canadian officials, where they were able to discuss face-to-face Trump's threat of slapping all Canadian goods with a 25% tariff unless drugs and migrants stop crossing the border. But as the Prime Minister discussed the consequences of such a tariff on our economy, Brett Baer with Fox News reports Trump then said this.
Maybe Canada should become the 51st state. Prime Minister Trudeau nervously laughed, as did others at the table, but Trump went on saying, Prime Minister is a better title, but you could still be governor.
However, our Public Safety Minister Dominic LeBlanc, who was there, is shrugging it off, saying it was not a serious comment.
The president was telling jokes. The president was teasing us.
So what should we make of Trump's quip about Canada becoming part of the U.S.? How is the government handling this tariff threat? And should the feds be looking at internal changes to address the new administration? I'm Cormac Sweeney, and today on The Big Story, we're tackling those questions with Innovation Minister François-Philippe Champagne, one of the key people the Prime Minister is leaning on to help push Canada's interests with American officials. I met with him in an office on Parliament Hill. Minister, thank you very much for joining me.
It's a real pleasure. I think it's my third podcast that I'm doing, so glad to be doing it with you.
Proud to be in the top 5. So let's start with Donald Trump's comment that's created quite a bit of a buzz. It's grabbed headlines on both sides of the border, him talking about Canada becoming the 51st state. What was your reaction when you first heard that?
Well, I don't think we should take that very seriously. To me, we're all proud Canadians. And, one of the things that we have achieved as part of this Team Canada engagement is to demonstrate to the United States that to move from just being like the friendly neighbor of the North to the strategic partner of the 21st century. And so for me, it's really about demonstrating. And I think, honestly, let's step back. The fact that Prime Minister Trudeau was the first G7 leader to be with President-elect Trump, to me, is very, very significant. It sends a big message not only to Canadians, but to the world that President-elect Trump really appreciates Canada, wants to work with Canada, and is looking for a constructive relationship, that we have things in common. It's no surprise, by the way, that for many months we had seen that the two issues that would come up most likely were the border and trade. And in fact, they came together almost, because we've seen that the focus of President Trump has been about the border. And the good news is that we also want to protect the border. We've been working for months in having different scenarios, to have the assets, to have the people, to be ready if there was any surge on the border to protect the interest of Canadians. So that for me is a mutual goal that we have. When it comes to fentanyl, it's the same thing. We obviously want to interdict fentanyl, the chemicals that are coming from China to enter in Canada, and I would say North America. And the thing that we've been making sure that it's understood by a number of our American colleagues is that oftentimes when you look at these issues, you have to distinguish between Canada and Mexico. As much as we like our Mexican friends, the size of the issue is very different from one border to the other. You may have heard today, Prime Minister Trudeau said, when it comes to interdiction of people trying to cross the border from Canada to the United States, it represents about 1% of the people that enter the United States, compared to 99% coming from probably the southern border. And when you're looking at fentanyl, it's less than zero. I think it's about 0.2% that is coming from Canada.
Sure, but with this meeting, when the Prime Minister and Minister LeBlanc, Katie Telford, the Prime Minister's advisor, were down there, what did you achieve aside from just repeating the points you just made, which have already been made publicly by the Prime Minister and your government?
Building relationships. That's what matters. We all know that President Trump puts a lot of value in personal relationships. Like I said, for Prime Minister Trudeau to be the first leader of the G7, to have that casual, meeting that lasted more than 3 hours on Thanksgiving weekend, to me is very significant. It just shows you don't invite people you don't want to see at Thanksgiving with your family and colleagues and friends who were there. So for me, it's the best possible way to start the relationship, because we know that, and I was foreign minister during the first Trump administration, or part of it, and I do know that it's very, very important for President Trump, these personal relationship. We know that he's transactional. He likes to do deals. That means he likes to meet people, and the meeting went very well. And so I think we're starting on a strong foot in establishing that relationship, not only with him, but as you know, there were a number of people around the table. The future Secretary of Commerce, the future and National Security Director, the future Director of Homeland Security. So to me, it shows how much we have succeeded to move that relationship from, like I said, being the friendly neighbor to the north to the strategic partner, whether it's about the border, whether it's about security, whether it's about supply chain. And by the way, when we were engaging with our U.S. friends, folks should know that we always had three things. The first one was security of the North, the Arctic, and the border. The second one was the resiliency of supply chain in North America post-COVID. And the third one was always a growth agenda for North America. What can we do together to create jobs, to create growth, to create prosperity? So, to have the first encounter around a casual meal, to me, is probably the best possible way to start that relationship.
Did we get any assurances or guarantees at all? I mean, a lot of Canadians are worried about this tariff threat, businesses included, a lot of industries that you deal with on a regular basis. They're concerned about what this might mean for our economy. So when are we going to get those assurances, and how confident are you we might get an exemption for this?
Well, from the get-go, we said you need to take everything that President Trump says when he talks about tariffs seriously, because we know that he's been speaking about that on a number of occasions. On the other end, you need to take that methodically, to look at the issues. What we did in Mar-a-Lago was part of a well-thought plan where we said it would be important for Prime Minister Trudeau to be one of the first, and it happened to be the first leader of the G7 to come meet him, establish that relationship, make sure they understand that it's in our mutual interests to work around the border and fentanyl, that we are aligned in the objectives that have been stated to protect the border and interdict fentanyl. And then move on to say, but hold on for a minute, do you realize that we are your most strategic partner when it comes to energy, that we are your most strategic partner when it comes to critical minerals, that we are your most strategic partner when it comes to semiconductor, and so on and so on. So I think it gave the opportunity to have, to work on the issues that he put on the table, but at the same time to remind him and his team that, Canada is your best possible partner in a very uncertain world. I mean, you're seeing, I always say, I see the world in 4D. The first mega trend in the world is decarbonization. And I'd say Canada is way ahead of many countries in decarbonizing key industries in our country. The second one is around digitization, the whole AI, and he's very interested in that, and quantum and cybersecurity. The third one is around demography, attracting talent. And the last one is around disruptions. And we've seen even today, there's tension in the Middle East, more than that. There is war in Europe. There is war in other parts of the world that should be concerning. There's tension in the Strait of Taiwan. There's a number of issues that I would say, if you're the president of the United States, are going to be occupying your mind from day one. And I think from experience, you never want to be part of the problems, but rather be part of the solutions. And I think Canada can be part of many solutions that will have to be implemented, I would say, to face all the challenges, but at the same time to seize the opportunities.
More on the big story with Federal Innovation Minister François-Philippe Champagne talking about the Prime Minister's surprise trip to meet President Trump and the tariff threat hanging over our country in just a moment. So you're speaking about solutions. Donald Trump and his team want to see action at the border. You've talked about maybe bringing in new drones, helicopters, maybe shifting resources, but we still have not seen a detailed plan. When will Canadians and Americans get their eyes on Canada's actual plan for boosting security at the border?
I think Minister LeBlanc has been pretty vocal. We're talking about additional assets in terms of drones, helicopters. We're talking about, personnel that we can deploy on the border.
We don't know how many people, we don't know how many drones, we don't have that plan in place yet.
But we know it. You may not know it, but we know. As government, we know where we're going to deploy the assets. We know, how much assets we can deploy and how we're working with our American friends. Because let's be clear, we've been working with our, our colleagues of CBSA, which is, the men and women who are working at the borders. I've been working with their U.S. counterparts for generations. So that relationship exists very well on the ground. We're being briefed as ministers regularly about, is there any surge? And part of the reasons you've not seen kind of, immediate deployment of these assets, because, we're monitoring what's going on, but you've not seen like a surge in one particular area to say, okay, we need to deploy now. Now, if the goal is to say, let's just do more patrol, let's be more visible. I've said that in one of the interviews, I don't know if it was with you or one of your colleagues, we're going to be more visible, So, that is good in a sense, because that could be a deterrent as well. We'll be very visible on the border. And at the same time, when it comes to fentanyl, we'll be working with the RCMP is working with the DEA and other agencies to make sure that we share intelligence, that we are very coordinated, because we actually want to prevent those chemicals coming from China to enter North America. So my point is that whilst you may not have seen everything, a lot of work and a lot of preparation and coordination and engagement has been going on with the different agencies on the U.S. side. And to your point, we may need to present all that we're doing. Sometimes perception become reality. So what we say is that, listen, we have these, we are prepared, we are going to be more visible, and we're going to work together to protect the border.
But will we see that before the end of the year? Are we talking days, weeks before we get more details on this?
I think it depends on different assets, as quickly as we can reasonably deploy these assets. Some are existing, some we're going to procure, some we're going to complement. But, for Canadians who are listening, that should, one thing that should be comforting is that we have been preparing for that for a long time. Now, if you ask me, could you imagine that would come in a social media tweet about something? Probably not, although we've been there before. We have the experience and the expertise. And I would say Canadians should also take comfort. The fact that, from the moment there was a social media post to the response we have done, we should not panic. We should take, like I said, seriously, methodically. We came back to them. We had the Prime Minister and Mr. LeBlanc with a number of the Prime Minister's staff, the Chief of Staff, Katie Telford was there. And we were there and we had the chance to, I would say, change the perceptions and explaining everything that Canada is doing, because, like you said, it might not be visible to you. And I would probably suspect if you're the president of the United States, you have a lot of things on your mind. If you're the president-elect of the United States, there's a lot on your mind on both, whether you're the president-elect. And as you're looking at that, just looking and saying, wow, okay, I hope and I think that what came out of that dinner is that actually the Canadians are doing much more than perhaps was known to the president-elect and his team.
When it comes to our trade agreement, there's a review in 2026. How likely it just stays a review and things are as is, or how likely is it that we're going to see a renegotiation, and how nervous is industry about that?
Well, I don't have a crystal ball. In a sense, we're talking about a review. That's where we want to keep it, because we need to remind ourselves and everyone else, particularly our U.S. partner, that this has been an agreement that has provided benefits for all the parties for many years now, and it's been working successfully. Actually, it's kind of the gold standard in the world. And if you're looking at the world today, if you look at the fundamentals, North America has everything to succeed. We have the talent. We have the very large ecosystem, from manufacturing planes to manufacturing cars, to having biomanufacturing, to have mining and oil and gas resources. We have the critical minerals that are going to be needed to fuel the economy of the 21st century. And I think, and you're seeing it more and more now, critical minerals are similar in many ways to what oil was in the 20th century. Those are going to have these critical minerals. And, we're very fortunate as Canadians that we have all of them to build semiconductors, for example, to build the battery that we're going to need for electrifying our transport. We have been blessed by all that. So we have that in North America. We have an abundance of energy, which is going to be key to fuel the economy of the 21st century. And we have access to market. We are next to the largest consumer market in the world if you exclude China. So I would say that we are in a great position. And for me to talk about the fundamentals is what we need to be doing. And that's why I would say, in the words, and you're going to love that. I met one CEO recently, US CEO. He said, you know what? And I thought that his words were very telling. He said, you cannot undo what is natural. He said the supply chain between Canada and the United States are natural. It's like the flow of water in a river. You can't reverse course. It's been flowing since the beginning of time, and it's probably going to be like that to the end of time. So he said you could slow it perhaps with different things, but you're never going to be able to reverse that. And I think we are in the position now that our supply chain are more integrated than ever. 60% of the oil that the United States import is coming from Canada, and 50% of everything that we export is coming from the United States. We exchange $150 million per hour. That's the level of trade. So my point to you, Cormac, is that there can be a lot of discussions around, but the fundamentals of this being the most successful, the most significant in size and volume trading relationship remains. So it's in everyone's best interest to make it work.
As you mentioned earlier in this interview, the president is shaping his team around him. How needed is it that Canada then reshape our cabinet, our inner circle, to respond to the picks that Trump makes?
Well, the good thing is that, and I think that should comfort Canadian as well, I always say it's like a Netflix movie. We've been in that movie before. Actually, we've been in all the seasons and in many episodes. We've seen that. Many of us were there during the first term of President Trump, so we have the expertise and experience. That's why whether it's Minister LeBlanc, whether it's Chrystia Freeland, myself, you have ministers, we've all been involved one way or the other during the first version of the Trump administration. So we know how to deal. And actually, I think it paid dividends. You're seeing that the preparation we did with Ambassador Hillman, the contacts we have established with governors, with senators, with leaders around the United States, the fact that Prime Minister Trudeau, I keep coming back to that, but it's pretty significant. I mean, think about that. The first leader to have the first, G7 leader, but I would say I'm not aware of any other state leader which have been meeting, not states in the sense of U.S. states, but like a foreign leader of a head of government or president of a state meeting with President Trump. The fact that it's Canada and the Prime Minister of Canada, for me, it's a testament to the relationship, because if these relationships did not exist, Cormac, you would not get a meeting you would not get a dinner on Thanksgiving with President-elect. I bet that there'd be a lot of people who wanted to be in that seat. But in fact, it was Canadians who had these seats with him around the table.
Just to use another analogy, though, a hockey one, when a coach sees the other line on the ice, they usually adjust their lines to match the opponent's team. So should there be a realigning of people in cabinet to maybe put them in the best possible spots they should be?
But Prime Minister always has the privilege to decide who he wants to be. But, when you're looking at our line and their line, we're pretty good. When we have a level playing field, we always get, a good outcome for Canada. And actually, again, just look at the picture. You see there, he's with his team. We have our team, part of the team, which is there. There's been many contacts. And, compared to many, I think Canada has been able to respond to the concerns that had been expressed and to be at the forefront and on the front foot. We're not on the back foot. Like I said, the two things that President-elect Trump picked is two things that we had already prepared scenarios around. And to see that, they would have a casual dinner of 3 hours, not like at some G7 meeting where there's a lot of leaders or an APEC summit no, this is like, who would you invite at your home? You invite people who you consider, people you want to have a relationship with, people with whom you want to engage. You just don't invite anyone. And that first guest was Canada. And I think as Canadians, we should feel good about that, to say, you know what? The first guest of President-elect Trump at his residence that he picked. He could have picked anyone in the world. I don't know anyone today, head of state, who would not want to go to Mar-a-Lago to have dinner. And he picked Canada. So we should feel good as Canadians to say, despite, the thing that he said that we need to work together, he really values that relationship. And the closer you are, knowing who he is and the value, perhaps other leaders would deal with that differently. But we know from experience that President Trump puts a lot of value in these personal relationship interaction. That's who he is. And the fact that his first guest at the table was Canada, I think we should feel good.
Minister, thank you so much.
Thank you. It's a real pleasure.
That was Federal Innovation Minister François-Philippe Champagne talking about the Prime Minister's surprise trip to meet President Trump, Trump's quip about Canada joining the U.S., and the tariff threat he's hanging over our country. A reminder about a great new listening experience for you. You can listen anytime to the Big Story podcast on Seeker. That's Seekr. I'm Cormac Sweeney. Thanks for listening.